The ability to remember formulas and, more importantly, knowing how to apply them to a range of questions is an enormous and critical part of high school mathematics. So I thought today we would have a look at circles and more specifically finding the area of different circles. So let's begin with the formula. The formula is pi times radius squared. Now there's a few unique words and symbols in this formula that you may not have seen before. So the pi here represents an infinitely long number, okay? But for our purpose, think of it as representing roughly 3.14, okay? So you're essentially timesing this component by 3.14. The next part of the formula is radius and radius squared. What is the radius? Well, the definition of a radius is the length from the center of a circle to the circumference. And if you can picture grabbing that radius and dragging and pulling it all the way around to create the circle, that's essentially what it does. So what you'll notice is the length from the center to the circumference will always be the exact same and it'll always be the radius. Awesome, so pi times radius squared, we can abbreviate to pi times r squared, and we also know in maths we can get rid of the times symbol because mathematicians are super lazy, we try to write as least as possible sometimes, so it's pi r squared. Okay, let's explore these 4 questions. Now these 4 questions are really important because they begin with finding the area of a full circle, then half a circle or a semicircle, a quadrant or a quarter of a circle, and we're going to finish off by looking at a sector or what looks like a pizza slice. So let's get started. When finding the area of a full circle, we always begin obviously by writing our formula, again to show our markers that you know that you know what you're doing, and it's a great start and great practice. So area equals pi r squared. The radius in this instance is 4, so pi times 4 squared. Area equals 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16, so 16 pi. And we can write in our units, meters squared. Alrighty? This form that I have just written is what we call exact form. It means we haven't actually punched the pi into our calculator and we've left it like this. Some questions will ask you to leave your answer in exact form, others will ask to a certain number of decimal places. If so, just punch this little part on your calculator and you'll get an answer that will have so many numbers after the decimal point. So the question will usually specify to how many decimal places it wants. So if you punch this in your calculator, you'll get about 50.2654. If it wanted it to 2 decimal places, you look at the third number there, which is called the critical number, to see whether or not that 6 is going to stay as a 6 or round up to a 7. In this case, the critical number is 5 or bigger, which means we are going to round that up to a 7. So our final answer is going to be 50.27 meters squared. Super important to write in the units there, and we know that every area has a little baby squared on it. Alrighty? Let's have a look at the next question here, which is a semicircle. And we know it's half a circle because the little center here has been, the line has gone through. So we're going to go A equals pi r squared. Now, we have an issue, 2 issues actually. The first is this formula is used to find the area of an entire circle. And as we can see, we only have half. So what we need to do is manipulate this formula by multiplying by how much of a circle we have. So how much of a circle do we have in this instance? We have half. So we're going to multiply by half. That's the first issue covered. Awesome. Now let's have a look at the second issue. The second issue is they have not given us a radius. They've actually given us a diameter. Now this is used to trick students who will just put the 10 into the formula and continue solving. What we notice is the length they've given us is from circumference to circumference. Now that is called the diameter. Now, the diameter consists of 2 radii, because if you can visualize, that would be one radius, and that would be another radius. So we can simply halve the 10 to find what our radius is. Pi times 5 squared times a half. 5 squared is going to be 25, okay? Half of 25 is going to be 12.5. So we could write the exact formula as 12.5 pi meters squared. Okay, that's if they wanted it in exact form. Again, they may ask for a certain number of decimal places, so you would punch that into your calculator and get 2699 meters squared. Again, to 2 decimal places, we look at the third number there. It's a 9, which is pretty high, which means we're going to round up, and our final answer will be 39.27 meters squared. Just fit it in there on the board. Perfect. All right, let's have a little look at question 3 here. Now, question 3 again is not a full circle, it's only a quarter of a circle. So as always, write down the regular formula, pi r squared, and multiply it by how much of the circle you have, which is going to be a quarter. Alrighty. Now, the next thing that we want to do is substitute in everything that we've been told. We know our radius here is 6, so pi times 6 squared times a quarter. 6 squared is 6 times 6, which is 36. 36 times a quarter will be 9. So we're going to get the area as 9 pi meters squared. Again, that's exact. If we punch this in our calculator, we will get 28.2743. ... And rounding as always to 2 decimal places. Here we see the 4 is less than 5, so it's not going to affect our number, and we're going to write it as 28.27. Awesome. Now, one thing to use as a trick to make sure that your answers are right is if we go back to this exact form, we've got 9 pi. And I said at the start that pi represents roughly 3.14. So you can do a quick multiplication check in your brain and say, well, what's 9 times 3? 9 times 3 is 27, right? And our answer is just over 27, which means we're on the right track. We haven't done anything wrong, okay? It's super important because your teachers don't give you the answers in your exam that you can do little checks. I like to call them logic checks to make sure that you're on the right track and you're working out actually makes sense. All right, let's have a look at this last shape that we have here, which was a sector. Alrighty, as always, write down your formula. And again, multiply by how much of a circle you have. Now, it's not a quarter, it's not a half, it's not a nice number. So what you do is you multiply it by 50, which is how big this sector is, over the total degrees of a circle, which is over 360 degrees. Okay, we sub in our radius, which is 7, so area equals pi times 7 squared times, we can simplify this by crossing off zeros, 5 on 36. If you wanted to simplify this and leave it in exact form, you would just put this on your calculator here and write the pi next to it. I'm going to go straight to putting it in my calculator and I'm solving for what it is. Punch it in your calculator, you're going to get 21.3802, ... Again, to 2 decimal places. The third critical digit here is going to be a 0, which means that it doesn't affect our answer at all. And we write 21.38 meters squared. And again, we have the units of meters and we have squared to show that we've just found the area. Okay, so we've applied our area formula to arguably every single type of question that you may come across when it comes to circles. So learn this, understand the formula, make sure you know how to apply it, and most importantly, remember this little step at the end. Everyone gets so excited by the fact that they know their formula, they're substituting everything in, and they forget that they don't have a full circle, so they forget to multiply it by how much of a circle that they've been given. Alrighty, as always, try lots of questions at home, and if you have any questions of your own, bring them into your school teacher, bring them into your tutor, and make sure that you become an expert at this, because it does pop up quite a bit throughout your high school journey.